So thank you all for joining. I'm Divyam Goyal. I'm an alumnus of IIT Bombay from the class of 2012. So I'm from Hostel 3 and I'm going to be moderating today's session. First and foremost, on behalf of everyone, I'd like to thank IIT Bombay Alumni Association for conceptualizing and putting together this insightful series. Established in 2001, IIT works toward fostering a lifelong connection between the institute and its alumni. Driven by the central team through a network of volunteers, IIT plays an important role in crafting such enriching experiences for the entire IIT Bombay community. So thank you, Deepti ma'am, Mosmi, Jijo, and the entire IIT team for putting up today's session. Guys, if anyone has their audio turned on or their video turned on, please turn it off. And just to repeat, if you have any questions, you can put it on the chat. So we'll take it up in the later part of the discussion. So now, welcome to the Industry Insights virtual series. This series connects you with our accomplished alumni to learn from their insights on emerging business and industry trends. Each session will feature alumni from different sectors, offering valuable learnings from their respective domains. Today's session is going to dive into an important topic on leadership at the intersection of business and technology. And again, just repeating once more, so feel free to submit your questions over the chat, and we'll try to get Aparna to answer as many as possible after the first part of the discussion. Next, let's give a warm welcome to our esteemed speaker today, Mrs. Aparna Gupta. Aparna is a distinguished leader with over 25 years of experience at the intersection of business and technology. Currently, she heads the Global Delivery Center at Microsoft, where she spearheads customer innovation and delivery excellence. Throughout her impressive career, Aparna has held leadership positions across various functions, from engineering, product management, to customer success and country operations. She's passionate about leveraging technology for business transformation and is a strong advocate for gender diversity and women in STEM leadership. Aparna is an alumna of IIT Bombay herself. Aparna, we are thrilled to have you here today with us. So to get started, we'd love to know more about your IIT Bombay days. So you mentioned that you had been a general secretary at Hostel 10, as well as you had some participation in Mood Indigo. So you have any fond memories from that time?
Great. So before I dive in there, first up, can you see me, hear me fine? Just checking.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. All right. So first up, yeah, thanks for having me for this. And it was actually a realization that I'm actually doing the inaugural series, so no pressure. But yeah, we'll try to make it as interactive because I think it is going to be more of a conversation. But again, thanks for setting this up, Divyam, and the team, the entire alumni team. To answer your question, obviously, I mean there are many memories from IIT. I think you're specifically talking about the GSEC or the MI days. So maybe I'll pivot on the Mood Indigo one because yeah, that was always a lot of fun. So I think the experience kind of ranged from obviously volunteering right from the freshie year to watching all the action on the campus that happened like every single year, to really enjoying the all night music shows in the convocation hall or the rock shows and everything that went with it. But maybe the one memory that really has stuck in my head is this specific event that I was kind of co-organizing with a few of my batchmates. And there was some logistic issues where the poster for the entire event, there was some supply chain issue on the, I don't remember the details, but the posters and stuff couldn't be delivered on time on campus. And so the chief person who was organizing kind of asked if we would volunteer to paint it all overnight. So basically do a night out. And in return, we would all be treated to a buffet dinner at Leela Kempinski, which was a hotel next to the airport. Some of you, yeah, may be wondering, what era I'm talking about. But anyway, so that was that. And as all of us can imagine, in those days, like a night all nighter was not that big a deal. So we actually kind of partied along the way, painted the whole thing through the night, had a lot of fun with whatever creativity we could offer in return for probably our first five-star meal, and that was true for pretty much all of us. So that was kind of a high point during one of those mood indigos.
Sounds like a lot of fun at campus, Aparna. So during your career later on, do you think what kind of role did your experiences at IIT Bombay, both academic as well as extracurricular, play in terms of preparing you for your roles later on in life?
So I don't think, I mean, you actively think about, okay, this is what I'm acquiring and this is how I'm going to use it. But I think it's a good question. And if I reflect back, I think right from the day one that you hit the campus, I'm sure many of us will be able to relate to that it's a very humbling moment, So chances are that many of us have come as toppers in our schools, colleges, wherever we studied, and you were probably like the cream de la cream of wherever you were. But I think it's an eye opener to just see the sheer kind of intellectual capital that you see on campus. And so it's very humbling. And I think that's a very good grounding to go into, a life, I would say, right? Whether it's career or your personal life. The second that comes to my mind is just being able to embrace discomfort, right? Because very early on, whether it was taking a course, so for us, I think all of us had like a math or a physics course that you had to take through year one, year two, irrespective of, let's say, what specialization you would be doing. Some of us actually opted to go and do something on stock market or just economics, or even I remember signing up for a course on appreciation of art and art with science. So it was kind of a blend. I'm sure there are a lot more such courses being offered now. Actually, now I remember, it was called Introduction to Arts and Aesthetics, right? So these were just like very different experiences after having so intensely focused on like science and math and science and math, before you got into the campus. That was one form of, I think, embracing discomfort. But there was the other form of whether you signed up to go on a trek, you volunteered to go into maybe inter IIT as as part of the sports team, or even going and doing presentations and vivas, right? Because many of us probably didn't come from very a lot of exposure on public speaking, right? So just actually to address a team where you're presenting your BTech project or what have you, that itself also was kind of a step. And then I think the last one that I reflect on is just the bias to action or application. So it was not just theory, but so even again, starting from the first year, and I know many of us didn't particularly enjoy it, but whether it was around carpentry or the tinsmithing, I might even be forgetting some of those words. But I think the just that shift and the focus on application is probably that when I look back, probably set us up quite well for future.
That's wonderful to know, Aparna. Aparna, during your impressive career spanning across multiple functions and leadership levels now, was there a particular defining moment when you realized that you were most passionate about working at the intersection of business and technology?
Uh, so I would say yes, and it happened organically for me. And the way it happened was that I had already switched gears from being a biotechnology professional to getting into software engineering and being completely kind of immersed in front end, back end, like core engineering kind of day job. I think the aha moment for me was my first trip to the US to meet some of our top customers, and we were developing this kind of market and sales intelligence platform. And we thought like it was a great platform. It worked very well. It's like all the checkpoints in terms of its resiliency, its turnaround time, like everything was great. But I think the first time when I actually heard or watched a customer use it or sometimes just struggle on navigating, just even the visual, like, user experience and interactions. And I realized that, sometimes just as product leaders, you can be, or even like engineers, you can be in almost your own cocoon, not realizing, how usable is what you've built. Is there actually a market and use case for which you're building? All kinds of aspects. So I think for me, the eye opener was to just observe the customer's struggle. And from there on, I kind of made it my focus to always kind of ask that question, or ask for that exposure where we get that first hand feedback from the customer. And that kind of became a natural segue for me. And this was a startup, so it was easier for us to kind of navigate across than maybe a more structured organization. So that became a natural segue for me to start with like curiosity around product management, but then actually, taking on that charter and being responsible, because the buck stops at you in terms of, what does the customer want, where is the market heading, what is compete doing, and then how do you kind of bridge the gap from a product roadmap standpoint. And kind of have not looked back, because then I was very clear that no matter what role I do, I want to do it at the intersection of our customers and technology, just bridging that gap.
Perfect. And Aparna, during your career, like as you have transitioned these different roles and functions, so have you had a framework in mind, or have you developed a framework over time to navigating career choices? Something that could also help other aspiring people in the audience to, think through how they progress through their careers.
Yeah. I think that's a good question, but I'm probably going to answer it in a way which is not traditional, or at least what people may want to hear, because I consistently hear that, you need to have a plan, and especially as you get more and more senior, like, you need to know what you're actually doing so that you can acquire those skills, expand your repertoire and all of the good stuff. And I'm absolutely, aligned, and I get it, right? But it's just that that's not or that's not the way I have necessarily navigated my career, right? And I think I've used more, or I would say different yardsticks on that, and maybe I'll just share. And I don't know if it resonates. Happy to, have a more chat around this later. But a couple of things that I've looked at, right? One is just kind of an year-over-year reflection. Whatever appraisal or whatever you have in your organization. But I do tend to take that quite seriously, and quite seriously in the sense what I'm feeling or what I tell my manager is not as important, but it's a step back moment for myself to say, how am I doing? Like, am I doing the same job from last year, or am I doing that job differently? Right, that itself, like, if I'm not getting smarter in my job, or the way I'm doing it, or the way I'm approaching it, then maybe it's something for me to reflect, or I'm moving to a different job, right? So just that checkpoint is something that has helped me, because if the answer is kind of yes, that I'm probably doing the same job in a very similar way, then it's probably time to go and make myself uncomfortable again, so, and which basically then means, just start exploring and seeing what are the opportunities out there, and so on. The second, which I already touched upon, which is, yeah, just embracing discomfort, because sometimes, you just get so comfortable with your job and what you're doing. So kind of always like being on that edge to say, I'm slightly uncomfortable, I feel like I don't know everything, and hence that pushes me to, to do better. And it could be around learning, it could be around understanding, what some of the experts in the industry are doing, and so on. And a related part of that discomfort is just then the propensity to take some risks, right? And this was a very interesting anecdote, actually. My past CEO told me, which was that, she talked about just using a benchmark to say, or a yardstick to say, like, what are you taking in terms of a career risk? It's not like you're sending your son to war, right? And you're just doing a career. You may realize you're not very good at it, and you can just go back and do, something different. And that has really stayed in my mind, and that's a very good way to kind of rationalize every time, you're worried about, okay, is this the right role, am I going to be successful, etc., etc. Now, having said that, I think I do think it has to be grounded on, your own strengths, in the sense that what is the value add you can bring to the job, right? And then what is it that you can learn from the job, right? So those two things, I do, I have looked at consciously. And since you talked about my most recent role, which I'm like literally now 4 months in the global delivery role. That was definitely, one way that I looked at it, to say, what are some strengths that I can bring into this role. And obviously there's a huge learning curve, and I'm right in the middle of it, if you ask me right now. And yeah, and enjoying it thoroughly. So because ultimately it's about, enjoying what you're doing, and having fun.
Okay. And Aparna, what is your take on the role of networks like alumni networks or mentors or role models in regards to when it comes to shaping one's career and thinking about it and navigating through it?
So I have to say, I think I have learned that they go a long way to help you. And when you're going through the journey, you may not necessarily pinpoint it or realize the value that they're adding. But I think it's a good thing, number one. Number two, I also think that if you do it in an artificial way, it doesn't work. And what I mean by that is that building network is not like, sending LinkedIn requests. It's not about handing out cards, at a conference. At least to me, I mean, that, because yeah, it's just that 10 second, and none of you are invested in each other or doing anything. So at least my personal reflection has been that if you can find a common purpose to engage with somebody on, then the probability that, one, yeah, you actually build a network. It's not like, you just exchange cards, like I said, but you actually go and do something together, and hence establish, that connection and something that actually shapes your career, right? So that's at a very fundamental level, in just in terms of, just building networks. In terms of, I think, role model, I think one specific example that maybe I can give you is, and this is again a reflection. When I went through it, I don't think I necessarily realized it, but this was in like 2006, when again my CEO invited me for a particular conference. It's called Grace Hopper Conference. It happens in the US every year. Last 12 years or so, we've been actually hosting a completely India edition also. But in 2006, when I went to this Women in Tech, and it's an entire Women in Tech conference, which had very deep tech conversations to leadership to career, like it was an entire spectrum, and it had about 1,200 women engineers there. So for me, just to see that, I think there was something implicit that clicked, I think, in my mind, just to say that, okay, I could do this, or I could have, this kind of trajectory. So I think, yeah, so, and that can click in very different scenarios for you. But I think just being open and just like embracing some of these opportunities, the hit rate could be like 1 out of 10 where you feel like you got some value, but I do think that it's valuable. The last part, which is on the mentorship, again, I think obviously your manager, your leader can be your first and foremost go-to person. In my case, at least twice in my career, I have to, give it to my leaders for trusting me to take on a different role. I think one was just moving from product management to actually taking on the general management role in the startup that I talked about. And that was not up my alley. I thought I just hated like having to do anything with finance and HR and general administration, and I'm happy being an engineer. But it actually opened my eyes in a very, very different way. So I'm glad that she did that. And then more recently in Microsoft, when the my customer success role, which is actually a part of the core sales team in Microsoft, and for me to just sign up to move to the sales part of the organization, while still keeping my kind of tech kind of leaning. I think again, thanks to my manager, coach. I have had multiple, not multiple, at least 3 to 4, coaching kind of interactions. Um, Again, my reflection has been, we can sometimes get into it and say, oh, I don't think I'm going to get anything out of this. I don't think they even know what they're talking about. But the more diverse the coach has been, like somebody from finance and they're running banks and, investment banking or something like completely different, it's just an outside in perspective that, they have added, has enriched me in some way or the other. The most recent one that I had was actually during COVID, and this was a specific person who's also a very good like a voice and communication expert. So as all of us know how important it was, I mean, including today, like we're having this virtual conversation, right? So just how do you kind of adapt to being in this virtual normal was so kind of relevant in some of the tips he gave me. The second, just the focus on when you have to land something in 10 seconds, like it's almost like the elevator pitch, as if there are startup founders or employees in the audience will relate to. But just having the ability to translate what content you want to speak in 10 seconds to 10 minutes to 1 hour, I think is something that I thought, something that he really kind of helped sharpen for me. And obviously, it's always work in progress. So, yeah, but it's something I would, yeah, always be open to.
Some great takeaways there, Aparna. So now moving to the intersection of business and technology, what are some of the key lessons you have learned when navigating the complexities of aligning business needs with technology solutions?
Yeah. So if Deepthi or someone on the organizing team, I mean, I just had a few slides. Maybe you can just switch to like yeah, just scroll down. Maybe to like slide 3 or 4. Yeah, I'll just tell you. Yeah, this was just something about me. We can talk about it. Yeah, just stay there, please. Customer first. Yeah, because that's where I really want to start, right? Which is that I think customer is at the center of everything we do and what we want to do. Uh, there are times when the customer knows exactly what they want, and there are times when they don't know what they want. But if you are able to lead with customer empathy, right, and it can be a combination of which industry they are in, what context they are in, right, what geography, what are the constraints in their journey, what are the opportunities, then you can drive a lot more relevant and constructive outcome for them. So just as an example, or a couple of examples, and I'll give that in context of India, that we do work with a lot of our BFSI customers in India. So if you just take the example of their aspiration, obviously to go to cloud, like as most of you would know, like they are largely on prem even today, right? There are aspirations, and they are driven by different regulations. So whether it is what are the RBI constraints, right? And today it might be something, but 6 months from now the constraints themselves can change. So having that customer empathy to say what are some of the guardrails that they have to adhere to, right? What are some of the questions they're asking you about, let's say, a platform, a PaaS as a, a PaaS implementation versus infra as a service kind of implementation. So it's really, really important to know where they are, what level of maturity, what are they trying to solve, and then be able to break it down into a kind of achievable outcomes where we both can pace it, look at the success, and move forward. Another diametrically opposite example is digital natives, which are basically cloud first organizations. So whether it is a Flipkart that we have worked with, there's Make My Trip, there's Z, which has been in the news more recently. They tend to go through a lot of ups and downs just as a business. So how can we again be conscious of that and adapt to the swings, right? So there'll be times when they'll be crunching and consuming like nobody's business, and then there'll be times when they will really tighten the bed, right? So just keeping customer at the center, I think, would be kind of the first call out that I would have. Second, and if you can just navigate to the next slide, which is just around the product, right? Because our product or technology solution, whatever it is, sorry, just one up before this. So if you, yes, that's one, sorry. Okay, whoever's navigating, just one further. So anyway, I'll keep going. Yeah, just stay there, please. Thank you. So the product or technology, one, I think we always have to be humble about technology, right? Because technology rapidly changes. Technology can be disrupted. So it's super important to just know that yes, ultimately I have to anchor it to a solution, to a technology, depending on whatever field we are in, but also be agile to work or rework in context of what the customer wants, right? And that, I think, is an extremely important place to stay grounded. I don't know if some of you may have caught up on the on Netflix movie on BlackBerry recently. It is such an eye-opening one, and I'm sure many of us have gone through that era of we couldn't do without Blackberries, and then iPhone and Android happened to us, right? So I think it's super important to know the tech, build good tech, but also be very conscious of being grounded and agile on the things that are going around you. Second, the reason I call out process, because See, and these are actually not principles that are normally used in context of the whole how do you navigate and do good innovation and transformation for customers using technology. But the reason I'm calling out process is also a part of sometimes why projects fail or implementations or solutions fail is that there is just an inherent friction in adoption or change management. So if you're not prioritizing even that as a track, right, it's not just about the technology implementation. You can have a very successful implementation, but if nobody is using it, your project can still fail, right? So are you recognizing, are is the organization running from something A to B, or is that a net new thing that you're adding into their repertoire? And then how are you managing or planning for that adoption with their leadership, with their stakeholders, and so on? And the last but not the least is people, right? Ultimately people want to work with people, and the trust that you can build can be in good times but can also be in bad times. I think if you ask me, some of the most trusted kind of relationships that I have built with customers is when we had like a really terrible outage, right? Because that is when their business is down. How are you equipping them, how are you showing up in those tough situations, and how are you course correcting and addressing some of the situations, right? So sometimes it can be around high availability, or okay, we need to build a disaster recovery for you as a strategy, and so on. So I think it's super important to build that trust with people. And I think there is another flavor of the people, right? That you may have a visionary in an organization, you may have a series of decision makers in the organization, but sometimes there is just break in continuity, right? So let's say the CEO is aligned, then, or the CXO is aligned, they know what needs to be done, but a -1 or -2 level, there is no inclination. There could be political dynamics. There can be multiple checkpoints where you can just break the link and lose the plot. So it's extremely important to recognize the dynamics of the organization and then being able to build that continuity in congruence with the leaders. Because unless you have that mind share, you will just in the trenches you will be struggling and not succeed. So I think those are really the headline, if I had to call out. And long answer, but I hope that resonated with many of you.
Perfect. I think these are some great and very actionable insights. So, Aparna, can you also share some insights on how do you set up these cross-functional teams at that scale while ensuring that you're maximizing collaboration and uh, the potential outcome of these teams?
So yeah, we can move to the next slide, and I think I just wanted to anchor it mostly to a couple of things, right? I think the alignment happens when first up you're grounded on like a common vision and mission on what is it you're trying to do and why, right? Because unless you are aligned there, it's very hard to get everybody to be all in, because we can just have people running in all different directions and working really hard maybe but not not aligned. So just having
Mm.
that common anchored vision which everybody understands, and um, not assuming that just landing it once is good enough, right? You have to keep doing it. Like, you have to make sure that you're aligning and recapping the vision and what we are after. It's like going to the moon, right? I mean, it's literally the moonshot in whatever context you are, right? That what is the moonshot that we are after? So I think it has to start with that, and there has to be a deep sense of belonging on why it matters to you. So whether I am the HR person of that team, or whether I am the technical person of that team, or whether I'm a business person of that team, I think that alignment and the view, the answers will be very different, but just translating it to what it means to me, no matter who I am in that mix, is extremely important. And I think then comes the culture and the question that you are asking in terms of cross-functional teams, right? That how do you then build a very diverse team which will drive the success? And the diversity can be in terms of skill set, obviously. It can be in terms of experiences. It can be in terms of gender. It can be in terms of geo, right? If you're building a product which is catering to global audience, English speaking audience, so just depending on what your goal is, diversity of all kinds has to come into play, right? So that's kind of the three tenets at least I would look at. Then it is about when it comes down to actually people, and I feel like at Microsoft, I think we have a very good kind of philosophy on how to go about it, which is that as a leader, how are you driving three principles which are model, coach, and care, right? So how are you role modeling where we are and where we want to be, right? So upfront role modeling, and you don't have to be the role model on everything. You can actually even recognize or reward the role model to say this is how it should be done, right? So how are you modeling what is good behavior or what is good practice, what is good implementation, what is good way to learn? There can be different aspects of it. The second is coach, right? Which means, again, as a leader, how are you coaching your teams to get from A to B? Sometimes you can have extremely good engineers, leaders in the mix, but you're just trying to drive a transformation, and they will just have to acquire new skills, learn to operate differently, manage very small or very large teams. Suddenly it can be very, very different aspects that they need to build on. But how are we actually then coaching on an ongoing basis that every leader, because then it has to have a cascading impact across the organization. And finally, care. And care can range from how are you taking care of your team's career aspirations, right? Because sometimes you may have a vision and you may try to force fit a very good engineer, as an example, to something that he or she is not even interested in doing, right? So then that's where the dissonance happens, right? That we sometimes in that earnest kind of drive to get to an objective, we fail to recognize or miss the point to say that this is not something that is aligned with the aspiration of this individual. So maybe he or she needs to go and do something else, but you need to hire or build someone else who's eager to do that or whatever, right? So career planning and career mapping is one part of it. And the last is, of course, what I'm saying, like care. Just care for your employees in a way where you can build them to be successful in achieving the vision finally.
Makes sense. I think many interesting insights over there. So switching gears slightly to more of a business owner's perspective. So generally, many business owners struggle to answer the question around when they should invest in new technology adoption. So can you share your approach in terms of evaluating a business's needs, the technical feasibility, and the implementation costs involved when deciding on such technical upgrades? I think Aparna, there seems to be some interruption on her part. Let's wait. I'm sure she'll be back in a couple of minutes. And again, if you have any questions, then feel free to leave them on the chat. Yes, there seemed to be a slight I think we can't hear you.
Okay, now?
Now it's perfect. Yeah.
Okay,
So
sorry about that. Yeah, sorry, your question was?
yeah, just to repeat the question. So, talking from a business owner's perspective, like whenever they're deciding to invest in a new technology, so can you share your approach around evaluating the needs of a particular business, the technical feasibility of the solution, and the cost of implementation involved whenever you are going about uh, trying to figure out the ROI from a technical upgrade perspective for a particular business?
Got it. So I think, yeah, there is never a single answer. It always tends to be a nuanced answer. In context of Microsoft, definitely, I think we try to be the customer zero of whatever the new thing is, right? So even, let's say, 5 years back when Teams was just getting going and there was a dog food version, it was like we started embracing it and shifting that time from Skype, which was like the most recognized way to do kind of virtual calls and so on. So I think it does start with customer zero, just from the vantage point of my current organization. But if you just go to the next slide, and these are just kind of some kind of anchor points around, not exhaustive, obviously, but it does depend on some of the points that you already alluded to, right? Which is that what is the context of the customer, right? So it could be in terms of what are they trying to solve, what is their financial situation, what is their existing technology stack, is there an end of life which is due, right? Because as an example, end of life of a certain hardware is a very good inflection point, towards which leaders can make very big and transformative decisions, getting the right alignment early on and all of that, right? Competitive landscape, right? Sometimes if while it may be an overhead for them, if they don't make that transformation decision, then they could potentially be threatened to be wiped out because maybe a competitor has actually done a better job of just embracing a new technology. So I think there are multiple parameters. Internal alignment, another very important one. And just as an example, like I'm working with one of the largest kind of financial exchange in UK. And their leader was actually visiting us just a couple of weeks back in the delivery center. And they were actually talking about how they've come from a different bank where the transformation journey is at a different level. And they are at this point spending a lot more time just getting that alignment with all the internal leaders in the organization, right? So she's like, I would love to go and work with you and your teams on the actual technology and the solution and the implementation and the governance. But I know that unless I get that buy-in from every single department and every single leader, we are not going to succeed, right? So there is no silver bullet, but I think it's important to recognize all these parameters and the kind of the relative tension that they may have, and then be very conscious of what you can unlock, and then use, let's say, partners like ourselves to actually make it happen. And that's what I've seen, that the successful leaders who've been able to do something very big or dramatically different is that when they have taken that bet and taken the partner along to stitch something together. So just as an example, I think Yes Bank, which I think all of us may be familiar with, so they went with their mobile application like few months back, and their journey was very rocky also, because they were also going through some regulatory kind of audit and this and that. But just for them to lay out the principles to say, this is how we will have the mobile application. First, it will be only for the internal users. They had a very phased approach till they launched the complete go live. And yeah, so sometimes even patience is an attribute if you in the longer term want to have some very successful or transformative kind of outcomes.
Makes sense. Perfect. Switching gears slightly over here, Aparna. So the tech industry generally has seen a gender gap at the leadership level. So can you talk about your experiences in navigating your career as a women in technology and leadership?
Okay, so maybe then we can stop sharing the screen and go back to the conversation. So I think if I reflect on it, and I know that the gender ratios improved on campus, but not significantly so, or not as much as we would like it to be. But in a good or bad way, I think a lot of our onboarding or just embracing, that to just be a minority kind of started very early, right from the campus, right, and the formative years on campus. I also have to say that honestly, I mean, I'm probably blessed and grateful to not have faced like a bias which has been detrimental to my career. Like, if there were undercurrents or anything, it's not something that has come in the way, right? So I have to definitely be very forthright about that. Having said that, I think there can be small and subtle experiences, and a lot of them can just be around like unconscious biases that people may have. Just small things. And I was actually at a university campus a few weeks back, and I just gave one specific example, and the vehement nodding was something I realized, okay, this still happens, and this is still very prevalent, which was that a woman might say, or a girl might say something as an idea, like in a class or in an in an office setup, and it just gets overlooked or ignored, and literally the exact same idea, obviously in a different language, is said by some other guy, and suddenly it's, oh yeah, great idea. And the woman is just looking at saying, okay, so like what did I say wrong, or yeah, like were you not listening? And I when I gave that example, I think there was this whole reaction that I saw from the students, and that was very interesting, just to notice. The second, I have seen again, very well intentioned, where I've seen that. Leaders may make a decision about a woman with respect to, oh, maybe she is not good to take this kind of move in the role or change in responsibility, because this will require a lot of travel, or maybe changing a city or whatever, right? So in a good way, the person, man or woman, is trying to be nice and considerate about the person. But the underlying thing on that is that, yeah, you've not even asked or checked with the person. Maybe they have a support system or a way to make it work, right? So these are very small examples in some way, but they tend to be, they do tend to happen. And so I think we all are allies in that journey, and need to be very kind of attentive and conscious about it, or even cross check. And the more we can have that trusted ecosystem, where, yeah, people can actually raise it, and or point it out, and I could have it, you could have it. So I think that is good. Finally, if I had to summarize at a more generic level, it's like, we absolute terms, we do need more role models. There's no question about that, right? Because the more role models we have, the more it will help. And I just give you the example of those 1,000+ women in tech at a conference. So we just need more of that. Second, which is a more societal one, and which is something actually I try to focus a lot in my kind of pivot on women in tech, which is, it's just easier to drop off for women. So whether it is for family reasons or otherwise, if they just let go, there isn't that much societal questioning to say, oh, how come you're not going back. And somehow, so it becomes harder for the person to get out of that career break, or just embrace that discomfort, to say, oh, now am I irrelevant in the industry, or how do I find my footing back. So we do, at a societal level, need to create that environment where we are asking the same question that men get asked on, oh, when are you going back to your thing, or how can we help, or yeah, you don't want to get invisible, and hence make it harder for someone to go back. And allyship, as I talked, is just going to be key in all these aspects for us to make a difference, I think.
Makes sense. Do you have any advice for aspiring women leaders in the tech industry, particularly those who might be looking to navigate, career paths similar to yours has been?
So I think the first and foremost would just be resilience, right? Just stay. I mean, you might run into issues, you might run into, just where is my career going kind of moments. You might run into, personal situations where you may question, like, what am I getting and what am I losing at home and all of that. But careers are long, and whatever situation you are dealing with is hopefully likely to be short. So just stay. I think that would be, I think, my first guidance. The second, again, something that came up in a recent conversation, and it really resonated with me, that careers are rarely a ladder, whether it's man or woman. Jungle gym is is a nicer analogy, and an analogy closer to reality. So the sooner we embrace it and reconcile and actually be happy and thrive in it, the better, for everyone, right? And I think this is gender agnostic, really. And the last, which is that, just learn and keep yourself updated, right? Because again, no matter who you are and which industry you are in, you need to be up to speed with what is going on. So just learn, and lead with a sense of humor, right? Because the more start taking yourself seriously, the more it'll come in your way. So a little dash of humor doesn't hurt anyone.
Perfect, makes sense. And Aparna, what are your thoughts on the importance of diversity and inclusion, and especially like in relation to companies from a early stage startup scale all the way to large organizations? So, do you believe that organizations should implement? At what stage should organizations consciously implement practices around diversity and inclusion, around promoting diversity and inclusion in leadership and workforce?
So if you ask me, I think it's from day zero, right? It's not an afterthought. It's something, the life has to be like that, right? And I think the the sooner more and more organizations can recognize it, I think the better, because I'm sure many of us have read. There's tons of research that shows that how you can build better products, more profitable businesses. There are white papers, there are data points, all kinds of analysis available out there. But I think there is no right time in the maturity of a business to do that, right? It's almost like integrity as a core value, right? Like you can't say that, okay, first I'll just do the business the way I want to, or build the product the way I want to, responsible AI or not. I mean, if you were doing something around AI, and then it'll catch up, because right now I don't have the time. There are some things you just can't compromise or shouldn't compromise, and I think this is just one of those. Now, having said that, I mean, I totally get the practical constraints and reality, because I do come from the startup background. You're very hard pressed for time. You're always operating in very very stringent budgets and all of that. So I think it's just that little extra mile. So, for example, if you're hiring, are you asking your recruiter to at least say, I want to see some women profiles, right? If you are going through an interview round, are you making sure that at least one round through that cycle has one woman, even if it's a, you don't want to add another round, so there is a co-interview panel, but at least at some point there is that happening, just to ensure that there's no bias in the entire screening process, right? So I think this is just one example, but I think if the intentionality is there, then I would say not add too much of overhead. You can just instill it as an integral part of the culture, no matter what organization, small or large.
Makes sense. So, Aparna, on a slightly different note, so with technology advancing at a very fast pace, how have you managed to keep yourself updated with the latest technological trends, and what advice would you have in that direction for others?
So honestly, I every single day feel like I know very little. I always feel overwhelmed about how fast-paced the technology is. But to be honest, yeah, I think you just have to embrace it and know that you can never know all. So you can know some, and you need to find the network who you can lean on. It's almost like a phone a friend in the old world. I know now there is there's ChatGPT, and there is of course the good old Google or Bing or whatever. But I think just having that go-to mechanism, whatever it is, whether it's technology or people, I think is good. But I think my own learning, I mean, of course, there are avenues for structured learning, which I try to prioritize. Just few times in the year, you get those moments. So, for example, a Christmas, New Year phase when things are quieter. Invariably, I'll try not to take vacation the entire time, but actually block those 3 4 days to just study, like whatever it is, whatever topic is relevant at that point. Um, I try to sign up for speaking events or just participation in panels or conferences on topics which I don't know as much about. Because then I know that if I've said yes, then I'm going to do some homework before that. And a lot of us are probably used to doing some of the last minute, stretch to go and take an exam. But I think it just becomes an enforcing function for you to, do that research. And maybe the last one, kind of just kind of reading or reading on the go, right? So whether it's during travel, and it can be in the form of a podcast, it can be just things I've bookmarked to read, and so on. So just a lot of like bite-sized information that I can capture. And I do use like, so whether it's LinkedIn, X now, Twitter. I know people talk about there's so much not so relevant, but I think I've kind of narrowed it down to what I'm following, and things that I find relevant. So these are just some tricks, but like I said, bottom line, I feel very incomplete, but always work in progress on that.
Very insightful. And now, last question from my side before we take any questions from the audience over the chat. So, looking ahead, what are some emerging technology trends that you believe will have a significant impact on businesses in the future? And can you also share any advice for business leaders on how they can proactively analyze these trends and their potential applications in their specific domains?
Sure. So I think where we are, we do know that it is a Gen AI moment. I think the day ChatGPT got released, the world changed forever. Research was happening earlier. People knew that things were being worked on, but I think since then, if you see the sheer number of announcements, the expansion of from content generation to image generation to everything that we are seeing. Literally, I think that is going to be, at least in the near term, the most disruptive thing that will change the world in my mind. Uh, I think there's a lot of analysis, prediction, and all of that. But maybe one example and very close to home that I will share is something that actually Satya Nadella was asked at Davos, if I remember right, on how does he feel about his accomplishments at a 10-year mark. He just completed 10 years as a CEO, and he gave actually a very interesting answer. He said that more than my 10 years as CEO, I'm actually reflecting a lot on my 30 years or so of career in Microsoft, where I have seen a few disruptions, right? So obviously the PC world to the internet era to the mobile era, and this just seems to be, another such kind of inflection moment. And what this is probably the time to ground yourself in what is this actually going to mean for humanity. And the point he shared was that if we can reflect on how will we live or how will we operate in 2 years from now. So think of today as a minus 2 years moment. And I thought that was a very deep rooted and philosophical question, but a very good way to think about what a technology can mean for us. So that's something I'm trying to also get my head around, right? But then coming to your specific question on how people should embrace it, I mean, obviously there are different techniques. I know people follow, people may choose to lead, whether you're in whichever industry, you're watching what your competitors are doing, you're watching what are the constraints you might be under and all of that. But at least one of the personal trick that I have used through such shifts is to just use it myself, like just touch and feel it myself. And I do think that GenAI is one of those technologies, right? That whether you're in whatever industry you are, whatever role you're playing, you can read in the newspaper, you can consume it in whatever form or shape, but the more you can touch and feel it in the context of your personal life, your professional life, uh, I think it's going to give you a more realistic version of what you could do with it. So that's really my thought for it. And so if you ask me, and since you said this is my your last question, I would say right now what I'm looking at is the M365 Copilot, which is essentially Office, Word, PowerPoint, and all the kind of Gen AI enabled insights that I'm getting. So just as an example, I think as we were going through, whether some of the, narrative we want to cover today, like every touch point, I'm trying to say, okay, what is that fishing out for me? And I'm just learning. So whether I'm writing an email from my Outlook, whether I'm generating, action items from my Teams meetings, I'm just embracing it completely and kind of, yeah, getting uncomfortable about doing it, but embracing that discomfort myself.
Perfect. Sounds good. Very insightful. Guys, if there are any questions, feel free to leave it over the chat. I believe that it seems you have covered majority of the questions during the session because we don't see many questions over the chat right now. Um, Okay, I think in that case, we can move towards ending the session. So, on behalf of everyone at IIT Bombay Alumni Association and the entire audience, I'd like to express our sincere gratitude to Aparna for taking out the time to share with us today her invaluable insights and experiences. Your leadership journey and perspective at the intersection of business and technology have been very inspiring. We'd also like to extend a special thanks to Hima Manchula from Aparna's office for her immense help with planning today's session. So thank you again, Aparna, and everyone for joining us today. We hope you found the session insightful. Stay tuned for upcoming sessions in the Industry Insights series, featuring more such esteemed speakers like Aparna. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Thanks once again for having me. And yeah, it would. I would have loved to have some dialogue, but I hope there were some things at least that resonated with people. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Aparna.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.